You're tuning into something different, something deeper. Welcome to a space where the unseen becomes seen, where the patterns beneath reality are decoded. This isn't just a podcast, it's a journey into the mechanics of belief, perception, and the multidimensional truths shaping our world. If you've ever felt like an outsider looking in, questioning the systems you're told to follow, you're in the right place. This is The Outcast, the Pattern Podcast. Let's dive in.
You know, it's funny, we humans, we seem hardwired to try and make sense of everything, right? To find some order, some pattern, even when things feel completely chaotic.
Absolutely. We build systems, look for meaning everywhere.
Well, okay, so today we're going to unpack something really fascinating that totally plays with that tendency, the Discordian Society.
Ah, yes. Coming out of the, late 1950s? Greg Hill or Malaclips the Younger?
Right, and Carrie Thornley, Lord Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, quite the names.
Quite the names and quite the phenomenon. It's almost like a philosophical, practical joke, but one that got really deep, you know?
Totally. And their main text, the Principia Discordia, I mean, it's wild. It's like part spoof of religious texts, but also calls itself a gospel of chaos.
It definitely throws you for a loop.
Yeah.
Intentionally, I think.
Sure. So our mission for this deep dive is to really explore Discordianism. What can this seemingly chaotic movement tell us about, well, how societies actually form, and maybe more interestingly, how even movements trying to tear down order can end up creating their own kind of structure.
Yeah, that's the core puzzle, isn't it? Can a philosophy that's based on chaos, that worships chaos, actually end up becoming its own recognizable pattern in the world? It's a bit of a head-scratcher.
It really is. Okay, so let's dig in. If we're talking about this gospel of chaos, what are the main ideas? What's really at the heart of Discordianism?
Well, essentially, there's the veneration of Eris, the Greek goddess of discord and chaos.
Okay, Eris. Got it.
But it's more than just adopting a myth. The core idea is that this whole concept of order versus disorder, that's something we impose on reality.
So it's like a human construct.
Exactly. Discordians would argue reality itself is just, fundamentally chaotic. And our attempts to create neat, tidy systems are kind of artificial. Necessary sometimes, maybe, but still artificial.
Right, so it's less about, anarchy in the streets and more about a philosophical viewpoint, recognizing the inherent messiness.
Precisely. And that leads to this really interesting concept they call Katma.
Katma.
Okay. Yeah, C-A-T-M-A. It's this idea of holding your beliefs really lightly, almost playfully. The Principia encourages you to, try on ideas, but be ready to discard them if they stop making sense or being useful.
So it's all aimed at sort of poking fun at dogma, at systems that get too rigid.
Absolutely. Deflating anything that takes itself too seriously. It's a kind of philosophical satire, really.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the source material we're drawing on brings up this term, egregore. What exactly is that? Sounds a bit esoteric.
It is a bit, yeah. But think of it like this. An egregore is a kind of collective thought form, almost a psychic entity that's built and sustained by the shared belief and energy of a group.
Okay, like a group mind, almost.
Sort of, yeah. Many established things, religions, nations, big social movements, corporations even, you can see them as having or being egregores. These patterns of thought that gain power, the more people buy into them, like the spirit of the thing, fueled by belief.
Right, I think I get it. So Discordianism, then, with all its absurdity and chaos worship, it sets out to be a kind of counter-egregore.
That seems to be the idea, yeah. A chaos virus, as the source puts it. Something designed to sort of playfully disrupt or dissolve these more established, often rigid egregores using humor and absurdity.
That's the plan, anyway.
That's the plan. But, and this is where our source really digs in, this is where the paradox lies.
Ah, okay. The paradox.
Yeah. In the very act of trying to dismantle systems, did Discordianism accidentally create its own system, its own pattern?
How would that even happen? If your whole thing is chaos, how do you stumble into structure?
Well, think about it. They gave chaos a name, Eris. They created a text, however weird. They shared jokes, symbols, ideas.
Like the golden apple or the sacred chase symbol.
Exactly. Even if it's all done ironically, with a wink, the act of collectively engaging with these things starts to form a shared understanding, a common ground. The source points out, look, they ended up with symbols. They had their own sort of ironic rites, initiations, their own memes, and not just internet memes, but like cultural DNA that spreads.
Little units of information.
And even a kind of mythos, stories about Malaclips and Omar, however tongue-in-cheek it all was.
So the very act of participating in the parody starts to give the parody itself a recognizable shape. Is that it?
That's the argument.
Yeah.
It still needs attention, belief, even ironic belief, shared understanding, mutual recognition of the core. Well, non-tenants, maybe.
Yeah, non-tenants. I like that.
And this has some really interesting echoes when we look at society today,
How so? Where do you see the connection between this, like, quirky 50s thing and now?
Well, think about the internet age. Think about weaponized memes. Think about how satire and genuine belief get completely tangled up sometimes. This whole era of post-truth performative irony.
Yeah, things can get pretty blurry.
The source suggests that maybe Discordianism was like an early pioneer of this kind of ultimate metaphysical Trojan horse, a pattern of thought that hides its own influence behind this mask of not believing in anything seriously.
Oh, okay. That's a heavy idea. The source even uses the phrase irony as the final camouflage of control. What's that getting at?
It suggests that if your whole mode is irony, if you claim to believe in nothing, you might still be playing a part. You might be following unspoken rules or fitting into expectations within that very ironic framework without even realizing it.
So you think you're outside the system?
But you've just stepped into a different kind of pattern, a different social dynamic, maybe one that's harder to pin down because it's so slippery and ironic.
If you believe in nothing, you are still playing a part in the script. Okay, that quote really lands. It suggests even detachment can be a role, a pattern.
That's the implication. The Discordian, thinking they've cleverly sidestepped all the usual traps, might have just swapped one kind of influence for another, maybe one that feels freer, but it's still a form of social patterning.
Okay, so let's go a bit deeper then. The source talks about the role of laughter in all this.
Right. Laughter is key here. The source highlights how powerful laughter can be for, like, breaking conditioning. Well, genuine laughter can shake you out of your usual mental ruts. It disrupts those ingrained neural pathways, forces a new perspective, even for a moment. It can be genuinely liberating, helping you see things differently.
Yeah, I can see that. A good belly laugh definitely resets something, but then the source mentions ritualized rebellion. What's that about?
That's the potential flip side. It's when the laughter, the chaos embrace, stops being just a tool for disruption and starts becoming, well, the basis of an identity, a community marker.
So the rebellion itself becomes the routine.
Kind of, yeah. When acts of subversion or absurdity become expected, repeated within the group, they can harden into their own patterns, their own rituals. And the source makes a really sharp point. Any pattern, if you don't examine it, can become a kind of cage, even one built on the idea of breaking free.
So the anti-establishment movement starts to look a bit like an establishment in its own way.
That's the core idea. The source draws parallels between this dynamic and all sorts of other societal patterns. Religion, obviously, but also nationalism, academic circles, social media trends, even these big opposing cultural camps you see today.
Like woke and based, those kinds of things.
Exactly. Things that seem oppositional but might function through similar underlying pattern-forming mechanisms. The basic human drive to gather around shared ideas and practices seems incredibly strong, and it tends to create structures, whatever the starting point was.
Wow. Okay, this definitely makes you pause and think about, well, who or what might be shaping your views, right? Even in spaces that feel totally free or anti-authority.
Totally.
So, okay, boiling this down for the listener, for you and me. Why is this deep dive into Discordianism and egregores actually matter? What's the takeaway?
I think the big thing is it prompts that self-reflection about our own beliefs and maybe even more importantly, our disbeliefs. Where are we putting our attention? What frameworks are we operating in, even the ones we think are just jokes or ironic stances? Could they be shaping us more than we realize?
And the source offers a way to navigate this, something about sovereignty through detachment.
Yes, it's presented as a possible path. It's not about rejecting the humor or the absurdity. Discordianism has valuable insights there, but about not blindly signing up for the joke as if it's the new truth.
So appreciate the laughter, but don't worship the joke itself.
Exactly. Recognize the power of that disruptive humor, but don't let irony become just another unthinking habit. It's about trying to see all the patterns, including the ironic, chaotic ones.
Because making fun of power doesn't automatically mean something has no power or influence of its own.
Precisely. The source really pushes us to question belief itself, including our own firm disbeliefs or skepticisms. Can we stay flexible? Can we use ideas, use frameworks, without getting trapped inside them?
And that's sovereignty, not needing to constantly rebel.
Yeah, that seems to be the idea. Freedom from the automatic need to always push back, because you recognize the game itself. You can choose when and how to engage, rather than just reacting within a predefined ironic stance.
That feels like a much more grounded place to be. The source ends with a really striking quote.
It does, yeah. Every god is a mask. Every mask is a mirror. Every mirror shows you the same thing. Your own reflection distorted by what you project.
Ooh. Okay, so the big takeaway seems to be Discordianism, for all its chaos and anti-structure goals, ends up being this fascinating case study. It shows how patterns just emerge, how structure finds a way, even in movements trying to run away from it.
It really does. It's almost like that impulse to create some kind of framework, even a really weird, jokey one, is just fundamentally human. It started as a way to maybe undermine rigid systems.
But became its own kind of recognizable, if chaotic, pattern.
Exactly. And it highlights that tendency towards pattern formation. So if you're trying to understand your own freedom, your own agency, it's worth looking past the surface laughter sometimes and asking, okay, what else might be going on here? What subtle patterns am I part of, even in the free spaces?
Which definitely leaves you wondering, now that we've sort of seen this chaos virus and how it might operate, what other movements out there, things that seem formless or purely rebellious today, might actually be developing their own underlying structures, their own hidden patterns and influences? Something to chew on.